in talking to our legal department. I said, the tax people, you mean the IRS? And she said, yes. And I said, so your legal department, is going to cave here? And she said, yes. And I said, what's their beef? And they said, well, they think you're promoting, that people break the law and so forth. And I said, look, these are questions that are legitimate and factual. The facts underlie these. So why don't I come down and talk to your legal department? And she was very young, very naive, and she said, great idea, I'll set it up. And so I went down, of course they wouldn't see me. So anyway, we tried everything. The Senate Finance Committee held a hearing. I received a call one Friday night from David K. Johnston, 30 years the tax reporter for the New York Times. And he said, oh, Mr. Schulz, do you know the Senate Finance Committee is having a hearing next Tuesday or whatever, next Monday, on your ads? I said, no, I didn't know that. And he said, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I don't know. What do you do about it? He said, why don't you call him and ask to be a witness at the hearing on your ads? I said, that's a great idea. So I called Senator Grassley's office on Monday. That was a Friday night that he called. And they said, oh, you have to fax your request down, which I did. And I got a fax back saying the witness list is closed. If you have any statement to add to the record of the hearing, submit it. And so anyway, with all of that, it was just so depressing. I said, gee, this is terrible. They just won't answer these questions. So I think I'll go on a hunger fast. And down on their front doorstep. And so I went to the National Park Police and got a permit to park my van and this little trailer at 14th and Constitution, which, if you know where that is, it's equidistant between the Washington Monument, the IRS building, and the White House, just off the intersection on park property, National Park property. And while I was down there, I decided to go visit the Liberty Caucus, every member of the Liberty Caucus. This is a group of, at that time, 17 congressmen in the House that Ron Paul created. And these were people who said, in voting on legislation, they will take into consideration the Constitution. So this was the Liberty Caucus. So I had this list of 17, and before I started the Hunger Fast, I had sent a flyer out to every radio show in America, all talk show hosts. And it worked. They all wanted interviews. So while I'm down there, when I'm not talking to these congressmen, I'm doing interviews. And I would always tell the people in the audience, look, call the White House, you'll get a live operator. Just say to the live operator, look, don't let the guy die, answer his questions. And thousands of those calls were going into the White House. It caused Lawrence Lindsay, the head of a major department in the White House, like Economic Council or something of that sort, to write and deliver me a note on the 19th day of the Hunger Fast. But in any event, while I was down there, I went to the congressman, and I had this list of the Liberty Caucus members, and I started at one end and went to, including Ron Paul, and I would explain to them, look, we've petitioned for redress of these. The government appears to be violating the taxing clauses. We petitioned for redress. They won't respond. I've tried everything. This is terrible. They've got to respond. So I'm on a hunger fast here, to the death. I'm going to stay there until they respond. And so I said to them, it might be nice to have a press conference on this. I'd like to have a press conference on the House Triangle. The House Triangle is a triangular piece of land, not very smaller than this room, where there are slates, and it's triangular shaped. And it's where the congressmen hold press conferences outside. But in order to hold a press conference there, a congressman has to request it. And only Ron Paul and this guy, Roscoe Bartlett, had any interest in this. And the press conference was held, and Ron Paul and Roscoe Bartlett, Roscoe himself, and then Ron Paul had a meeting at the White House, and so he sent Jeff, I think it was Jeff Dice, that came out and read Ron Paul's statement. But only those two people responded. So so on the 19th day, this note from Lawrence Lindsay arrives and says, you will receive a a response from the IRS commissioner, a substantive response. And the next day he called and said, okay, up until this point, he said, Bob can come in and talk to our chief counsel, and but he can't bring anybody with him, and he can't record the event. So I wasn't interested, of course, so I continued with the fast. But on the 19th day, this note came, and sure enough, on the 20th day, the IRS commissioner called and said, okay, we agree to meet in a recorded public forum to address the issues and answer the questions. Great. Then Ashcroft, the Attorney General's office, called, a guy named Dan Bryant, the number 3 man, but he called Roscoe Bartlett, and I was in the office, in Roscoe Bartlett's office. But Dan Bryant said this. Now remember this, please. Dan Bryant said to Congressman Bartlett, all right, we're going to respond. We're going to agree to meet in a recorded public forum, and we'll address these issues and answer these questions. But we do not want history to show. We don't want it recorded. We don't want it going down in history as the government is responding to a citizen's petition for redress of grievances. We do not want to set that precedent. So, Congressman, write us a letter so that we're responding to a congressman. Now, I was, a little weak at the time, and had I been a little quicker, I didn't quite pick up on just how significant that. I was glad that they were going to agree to meet and address the issues. So I sat down with Roscoe Bartlett, and he hand wrote a note, and he said, let's go over and deliver this, and let's negotiate. So we went over and negotiated at the DOJ's, the Attorney General's office, and they wanted it in a secure hearing room so that nobody could come in off the street and disrupt things. And so Congressman Bartlett said, well, we got these very secure hearing rooms on the Hill, so it was agreed. And I said, we have so many questions, we can't do this in one day. We're going to need 2 days. That was agreed. And I said, we don't want a lot of cameras, flash and all that stuff. Just, we'll have a camera crew. You guys can have a camera. The government can have a camera crew, but that's it. They agreed to that. And so it was all negotiated, and had them sign that they agreed on the bottom of Roscoe Bartlett's letter. And then I think they got nervous because we went down to look at this hearing room to see how it was wired, because we said, okay, we're going to do a live webcast of this event so that anybody in the world can tune in, the camera will go right on the face of these government witnesses as they answer these questions. People don't have to be there, they can watch it. And I think that made them very nervous, that they weren't going to be able to control this event to the extent that they may have wanted to control it. So the date was set, though, when we negotiated with Roscoe Bartlett and Dan Bryant. The date was set for September 23rd and 24th. Then we had 9/11. And so I wrote and asked for to postpone this till early February, because I didn't want us to appear to be financial terrorists. We're going to end the income tax at this terrible time, when we're being attacked and so forth. So it was reset for February 2nd and 3rd, and then they pulled out. And we went ahead anyway. We rented the ballroom at the Washington Marriott, and we put under oath a lot of tax professionals to answer the questions the government wouldn't answer. And then that was in early 2002. But then a very significant development occurred in, we're down now at the bottom of this chart. Ron Paul was a member of the House International Relations Committee. Now we know that President Bush wanted to go into Iraq from day one. I think it's pretty well understood now. From day one of his administration. And of course, as time went on, these war drums, were really beating. But somebody probably said, well, wait a minute, doesn't Congress have a say here? And so the White House prepared the Iraq resolution and sent it over to Congress for them to pass. And the Iraq resolution, the White House's Iraq resolution, fell to the House International Relations Committee. A bill gets sent to committee first. And the chairman of that committee was somebody until this time I had a lot of respect for as a constitutionalist. It was Henry Hyde. And Henry Hyde was chairman of that committee. And they held a hearing on the White Houses on October 2nd and October 3rd, 2002, months before we went into Iraq in March of 2003. And when Ron Paul's turn came to speak on the second of those 2 days, October 3rd, Ron Paul said, and you can do as I've done, you can get the trend, if you go to the house.gov and just find your way to where you can, to the House International Relations Committee of the hearing on October 2nd and 3rd of 2002, follow a bunch of links, and you could actually order the transcript from that hearing. But here's what it says, and this transcript is on our website. Ron Paul's turn came and he said, "You are debating the wrong bill. I would like to substitute a bill. This is what you should be debating." And what he described was basically a declaration of war. This is what the Congress should be debating. Not a bill from the White House that, if passed, transfers to the White House, the president, the decision of whether or not we're going to go to Iraq and when. And Ron did a great job of quoting from the Federalist Papers and James Madison and so on. Now here's what how Henry Hyde responded. You'll see this in the transcript. He said, "Events have overtaken the Constitution." He went on to say that the Constitution is inappropriate and anachronistic. Now, so when I heard that, of course I'm following this, when I heard that, I naturally was incensed. I mean, this was terrible. A man of his stature, we're going to go into Iraq, we're going to allow the president. The Founding Fathers worked very, very hard to make sure that this decision to apply the armed forces of the United States and hostilities overseas would never rest with one man. It would rest with our representatives. But this is what's been happening. Kosovo, 17 times apparently, since World War II, or more now. So anyway, I said, okay, that's worthy of a petition for redress. So we prepared a petition for redress of grievances regarding the Iraq resolution. And we said, while we're at it, there's a few other hot-button issues. There's a few other things that we should be addressing. We, the people, should be addressing. We said there is this issue of the Federal Reserve, clearly unconstitutional. So we prepared another separate petition for redress of that grievance. And we said, here's this USA Patriot Act passed right after 9/11. It violates our privacy. It allows the government to come in my house, copy my hard drive, leave, and not even tell me they were there. It's unconstitutional. And so we prepared a petition for redress of that grievance. And we prepared another petition for redress of grievance regarding the income tax system. Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but is there a copy of the transcripts regarding the Henry Hyde and Ron Paul discussion you just mentioned somewhere accessible?
Yes. As I say, if you go to the house.gov, you can go to our website and go to archives on our website and scroll down to around October, November of 2002, where we actually put a PDF or we quote right from that transcript. But you can get the full transcript. It's almost an inch thick. You can get the full transcript. I forget who it is. You go to house.gov and go to that committee, the House International Relations Committee. Scroll down to the hearing held in their archive. You can scroll right down to the hearing held on the Iraq situation in October of 2002, and click on there and it will tell you how to obtain a copy. You pay $20 or something and you go to whatever House Publications or something, I forget the name of it. But I've done it and you can do it as well. or you can go right to our website. We didn't put the whole transcript there, but we certainly put that part that dealt with this, Ron Paul and what Henry Hyde had to say. But that's treason. That's pretty bad. So we prepared, now we had 4 petitions for redress of grievances. And what we decided to do was serve them on every member of the Congress, all 535 members, 435 members of the House and 100 senators, as well as the President and the Attorney General. And so we put them up on the website, and on November 8th, this is like a month after the hearing, we had these 4 petitions, and in those petitions, in the transmittal of those petitions, we said to them, the recipients, the people who were going to be served these petitions, we said the people would be on the National Mall at 2 o'clock on November 14th, 2002. And we ask every one of you to send that's a recipient of this, every congressman and the president, the attorney general, to send a representative over, and if you don't have the answers to the questions, at least let us know when you will answer them, when you will respond. And we had we had a permit from the National Park Service, National Park Police to be there, and we contracted with the company that does all the staging for the fireworks and everything, the big events in Washington. So it was a pretty big deal for us. And we caravanned from different points in the country. I flew to San Francisco and we caravanned across. We had overnights in 2 or 3 places, and we had rallies there, and it was great. But the point is, it was only 600 people, that showed up on the mall that day. Of course, they're watching this, right? 600 people. We had a live webcast. More people watched it on the webcast, I'm sure, than were there. But nobody showed. It was there, and we had, by the way, we had constitutional scholars assist us in the preparation of all of these petitions for redress of grievances. Ed Vieira, Walker Todd, and others. Geniuses. People who know the political, legal, economic history of every provision of the Constitution and all these Supreme Court lines of cases having to do with these provisions. Geniuses. And all we were asking for were answers to questions. We weren't saying, shut down the Federal Reserve next Tuesday or anything like that. We just want some questions answered. Questions which would bring the truth out. And questions which were, tied back down to the Constitution, to particular provisions of the Constitution. So they didn't show, and it was there that I gave this no answers, no taxes speech from that stage. And we had a live webcast of that event. And we had done our homework, as you'll see, coming up. We did our homework on what is the meaning of the last 10 words of the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to petition the government for redress of grievances. What does it really mean? What was the original intent of the founders, when they put that in there? And so I gave that speech there. Let's see, I'm going to run through that. It's taken too long to go through this background, but IRS has been retaliating. They don't like what we do, so the IRS has been retaliating in one way or another. Not a problem, but it does tie you up. It ties you up, and that's part of their objective is to take you out of commission. We had a conference a national conference in 2004, in January of 2004, on the state of the Constitution in Washington. It was a great conference. We had renowned speakers on most of the fundamental rights, Second Amendment and so forth. We just had a great time. But one of the speakers we invited was Aaron Russo. We invited Aaron because he was the Libertarian candidate for president at the time. And so we invited him, and Aaron was there. And this is a great setting. It was an amphitheater in a major hotel down there. And Aaron was there for a few days, and he saw all of these people and all of these people speaking on all of these issues. And then he saw this. He saw me hand a check for $100,000 to Mark Lane to bring to assist us in bringing a lawsuit, a declaratory judgment action, an action where we're seeking a declaration of our rights under the last 10 words of the First Amendment, the so-called petition clause. I like to call it the accountability clause. And he saw that we were going to be back at the National Press Club in July of 2004. That we were going to try one more time to get the government to respond to these 4 petitions for redress of grievances regarding their violation of the war powers, tax, money, and privacy clauses of the Constitution. And so we were back there at the National Press Club. We did all the research, wrote all the complaint. We got 1,450 plaintiffs around the country to sign on as named plaintiffs. If you've seen a lawsuit, normally the caption of the lawsuit is, maybe a third of the page. So-and-so sues so-and-so. But here, the caption took 56 pages because it was the name and address of all of the plaintiffs in this case. Very brave people. I and the Foundation and the Congress and a whole lot of other plaintiffs put their name on that lawsuit, identifying themselves. This was not a class action. We thought about doing a class action initially, but we said, no, we can't do that because that leaves too much to the judge. The judge has to certify the class. And there's too many decisions for the judge to really, too much risk here that the judge could really put his foot out in the aisle or step on the hose here. So we decided to make it have named plaintiffs. And anyway, Aaron learned that we were going to invite the government again one more time to the National Press Club in July 19th. And we said that if the government, and we wrote the leaders of the Congress and the executive branch again, inviting them to attend. And everything we do, it's humbly done, it's with respect. We're never abrasive in all that we've done till now. We've been very respectful in everything we do. Knowing what our rights are and expecting them, to do the right thing. In any event, Aaron learned that we were going to be there and that if they didn't show at the National Press Club on July 19th, that we were going to march down to the federal courthouse to file the declaratory judgment action, seeking a declaration of our rights from something the courts have never done. No court has ever declared what the last 10 words of the First Amendment mean. There's a reason for that. It's the accountability clause. They don't want to be held accountable. So they managed to avoid this all these years. Imagine, the entire history of the country, the last 10 words, the meaning of that clause has never been declared. So in any event, we prepared the papers, We the People versus the United States. We decided to test the attitude of the judiciary, and we decided to do it on July 19th. Well, C-SPAN shows again. And so live, we're there in the National Press Club for 3.5 hours. Speeches, me and Mark Lane and a few other people. And it's live for 3.5 hours. So the government doesn't show. We have gotten a permit from the DC police to march, to form up on Freedom Square, which is just down the block from the National Press Club. If you've never been on Freedom Square, you get to Washington, go there, look for it. They got great inscriptions all around this, chiseled in the marble on the floor and on the walls. It's called Freedom Square. It's where people form up and start their marches, I guess. But that's what we did. So we had a permit. They shut down Pennsylvania Avenue and Constitution Avenue for us as we marched. All 600 of us marched down to the courthouse to file this historic lawsuit. But anyway, as we were shutting down at the National Press Club, and we're getting ready to go outside to march, I get a phone call from Aaron Russo. He's just beside himself with excitement. He said, my gosh, this is wonderful. C-SPAN, you guys did great, etc. And he said, I think I may make a movie, he said, something like that. So he said, try to get as much footage as you can. And So we did that, and following that day, we worked with Aaron. We went out to California a few times to narrow the tax issue down for him. He wanted examples. He wanted all our original footage of everything we've done. He wanted examples of a raid, by the IRS, on some innocent people. And the best one I could think of was I knew the Colaprets down at Virginia Beach, for the people who own Jewish Mothers, the restaurant there. You saw them in Aaron's movie. And he also wanted to know a good example of an acquittal of somebody charged with not filing his income tax. So I said, wow, that's Whitey Harrell, and Marcy Brooks was the foreman of the jury. She's great. We had her at the June 2000 conference. She was just wonderful. So we helped him, did a lot of research and worked with Aaron, and then we sort of didn't hear from Aaron for quite a few months. Except when he called and said, Bob, I've moved and I've lost all your stuff. Can you send me, get a lot of the original footage? I said, well, I don't know about original, but we can pull it together again. But anyway, other than that, I didn't hear from him for a number of months. And in the meantime, we had scheduled conferences to talk about the right to petition and a few other things. We had just scheduled some conferences around the country to begin in Tucson and Denver and Austin, and then from there. So Aaron calls one day and he said, Bob, would you mind, I've got this thing pretty well finished now, and would you mind, of course we did hear from him with his excitement when he interviewed the former IRS commissioner and got him to say that just because the Supreme Court spoke, years ago, you really think today we have to worry about what the Supreme Court said years ago? I mean, IRS commissioner said that. So he called me one day and said, you won't believe what I've got, Well, that's great. So he called and said, you're going to have these meetings. Could you maybe show this? We talked about the title of it, Freedom. He was going to call it From Freedom to Fascism. We thought Freedom to Fascism would have been adequate. But in any event, he said, could you show this in Tucson, the first of your meetings? And we said, sure. So he said, but we should really give him a real live theater experience. So I said, you mean you want me to rent a theater, like a commercial theater? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, we'll do that. So we did that, and it worked out very well. It was packed. And Aaron did show up, and I won't forget, this was the first time that he'd seen anybody react to his film. You get somebody putting as much into a film as Aaron obviously did, Freedom to Fascism, and then it's shown to the public somewhere, and at the end of the movie, the people just stood up and were cheering, and great. Aaron walked down the aisle. The tears were just coming down his eyes. He was just really caught up, and then he said, can you show this in Denver, and the next couple of, yeah, sure. So we put the word out. We packed. Long story short, over the next, 4 or 6 weeks, I was flying back and forth from New York, renting theaters, including Tampa, around the country, and to show this film, which we did. In 2005, we got the decision from the lower court in our We the People v. U.S. case from Judge Emmett Sullivan. And what this slide isn't quite right. It should just say Smith there. Judge Sullivan, the Smith and Knight cases were argued, but the judge only mentioned the Smith case in his decision. He said the government doesn't have to respond to petitions for redress of grievances. And he cited a Supreme Court decision in a case called Smith versus Arkansas. Smith versus Arkansas was a case involving public employees. The state of Arkansas had passed legislation saying that when public employees have grievances, they have to bring their grievances directly to these are on-the-job related, employment-related grievances, they have to bring their grievances directly to their public employer. They cannot form a union. They cannot collectively bargain. And so in Arkansas, you had state highway workers who formed an association of state highway workers. And they were on-the-job related grievances that the public employees submitted through their union, their association, to the state, complaining about one thing or another.